What's up, hello, my name is Emma and today I am doing a book unhaul. I am currently looking at like well over 100 books in my room that I am either selling on my Depop, which is linked below, or I will be donating to my local high school. There's far too many for me to mention in one video, so I've chosen about 60 books that I have either read and am electing to get rid of, some duplicates of books that I want to keep but I have an additional copy, or else books that I haven't read and don't think I'll ever get to that I will be talking about and showing in this video today. But before we jump in, I would like to give a big thank you to today's video sponsor, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers you thousands of classes on subjects like graphic design and illustration, entrepreneurship, business and marketing, productivity, and so much more. Inspired by the idea of getting rid of things that I don't need, I watched a really short but very useful class called Everyday Minimalism: Find Calm and Creativity in Living Simply, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Though I have absolutely no plans to be a full-blown minimalist, I took a lot of value in learning how changing up your habits and giving more purpose to the things that you own can be really beneficial in a lot of different ways. While there are a ton of free tutorials online, if you're really looking for some thorough instruction on how to improve a certain skill, you can watch unlimited classes on Skillshare for under $10 a month with their yearly subscription. If you, like myself, are trying to practice social distancing right now, if you're home a lot and struggling to find things to do, I feel like Skillshare is such a great opportunity for you to watch some content that's very engaging but also learn something new. So if you've heard about Skillshare, I feel like this is really like the ample time to give it a try, and the first 500 people who sign up using the link in the description will get 2 full months of Skillshare totally free. You get a free opportunity to broaden your knowledge on something maybe you've been putting off trying to learn about, and by signing up you also really help support this channel. So if you're interested, I highly recommend giving Skillshare a chance. As a heads up, I unfortunately lost some footage for this video, so you will see like my makeup and the lighting change a little bit throughout. Now, the first set of books I'm unhauling that I've actually read is The Testing Trilogy by Joelle Charbonneau. This is a story I thoroughly enjoyed when I read it back in 2014. It was at like the peak of YA dystopian, and so it had a lot of elements that I was reading in books and really enjoying. I still look back on this series very fondly, but my tastes have just evolved so much since I was 17, and I don't foresee myself ever giving it a reread, and I don't feel a compulsion to hold on to it any longer. Next up, I have The Glittering Court and The Emerald Sea by Richelle Mead. I'm actually missing the second book in the series, so I haven't read this one yet, but I did read The Glittering Court, and again, I really enjoyed it at the time. I'm a big fan of Vampire Academy and Bloodlines, and The Glittering Court just did not stick with me in the same way as those characters and those stories have. I also don't know if this is true, but I've heard that like a lot of the subsequent stories are like the same plot, just from a different character's perspective. And if that's true, I just really don't see the point in reading the same story over again with just a different perspective. It wasn't a bad read, just something I don't foresee myself ever really going back to. Next up, I have This Is Where It Ends by Marieke Nijkamp, which is a story I was very excited to pick up because it follows like an hour of a school shooting. This book has always been interesting to me because I do not think it's bad. I actually think it's a really good book. I just did not enjoy it all that much, and I think that's because I had too many expectations going in. I thought it was going to be like a high intensity thriller, but it was really character based, and like at least half of the story was flashbacks to give context for the characters, and it just was not what I wanted to read from this story. It's complicated because I do think it's a good book, but I just didn't have the best experience reading it. Next up, I have Save the Date by Morgan Matson. Now, this is a book that I feel I've kind of been hanging on to because I had read so many other Morgan Matson books. I own a ton of them, and I've always considered myself a fan of her contemporary novels. Unfortunately though, Save the Date is my least favorite. It was actually on my worst books of 2019 list. Honestly, I think this book was just a little young for me. The main character was like super naive and very annoying, and I had like no interest in any of the characters. I went into this book knowing that the entire plot is that there's a wedding and everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong, but the problem with that is the book became so predictable because every time a new event came or there was a solution, like I knew it was gonna fail. The family dynamics were definitely my favorite part of this story, but I really just like rolled my eyes a lot through it, and I didn't have as much fun as I expected to. I'm typically the type of person that can put aside a lot of those flaws and issues in construction, but sometimes it just really passes my limit, and Save the Date is a case of that. Next up, I have If I Stay and Where She Went by Gail Forman, another book I read a super long time ago. I read this like at the peak of its height when the movie came out, and I really enjoyed them. I definitely liked If I Stay like much more than Where She Went, but I found them both fulfilling and satisfying. Again, just don't ever foresee myself rereading them, and it's not a book that like I necessarily would consider like a favorite or one that really stuck with me. So I think it's just sort of taking up shelf space at this point. Next up, I have Dear Evan Hansen by Val Emmett, which is a novelization of the musical. Now, I've never actually seen the musical. I've never even listened to the soundtrack, but I picked it up because the mental health storyline really appealed to me. Unfortunately, though, it did not follow through, and I was very disappointed about it. This is another story where there's definite good and bad, but it just really left a nasty taste in my mouth with how a lot of the story is about taking autonomy away from a person who has ended their life, and I didn't like it. I would definitely still consider seeing the musical or listening to the soundtrack because I've heard that there are distinctive differences between the two, but this is just one that like I feel like I could have passed on. I'm not necessarily mad that I read it, but it just definitely did not fulfill me whatsoever. Next up, I have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is another book that I really, really liked when I first read it. I actually thought it was pretty brilliant at the time, but as I've grown, I realized that I read it really early on in my reading career, and I think that's why like I hyped up everything about this story. But I think the main reason I'm getting rid of it is that I've heard a lot of discussion over the years, especially since the movie adaptation came out not too long ago, and I've just realized some things I didn't pick up on initially, like the treatment of people of color, women, plus-sized folk, and whatnot. Some parts of it just make me feel a little icky when I look at it on my bookshelf, and so I think this one can go. Next up is Grim Lovelies by Megan Shepherd, which is a book I thought that I would love from the very start, but unfortunately did not like by the end. This book had like all the elements that it needed to be a favorite of mine. It's an urban fantasy, there's like a whole magical society, different magical creatures, it's set in France. A lot of potential, but the story just did not follow through. I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about the romance. The plot got kind of convoluted and uninteresting, and I didn't like the ending. So it's really unfortunate because I was like ready to be like, if you love the Mortal Instruments, you have to read Grim Lovelies. And it just did not do it for me. Next up, we have a recent read of mine, which is pretty interesting because, as I've noted, a lot of these books are ones that I read many years ago and have been holding on to for a while. That's like my thing, is I unhaul books many years after I decide I'm like not interested anymore. But the fact that I read this in December and I'm getting rid of it now shows improvement, and that is Winterspell by Claire Legrand. I picked up this book because I was doing a Christmassy reading vlog, which I never got around to uploading. I had been hanging on to this book for some time, but it was a Nutcracker retelling, which is a story I absolutely love, so I thought I would really enjoy it. You didn't do it for me either. There were definite goods and bads with this story. I really liked the magic system and the world, and I thought it did an interesting job of adapting this classic story of the Nutcracker to like a darker, historical, steampunky type story. But again, characters were like super one-dimensional. I didn't care for them. There was like some weird queer rep in the story where I can't tell if it was supposed to be queer or not. And I did not give a shit about it for like the last quarter of the book. So it's unfortunate, but maybe someone else will enjoy it. Next up, I have Things I Should Have Known by Claire Legrand. I read this a couple of years ago because I did a review for the publisher and I did really enjoy it. It's apparently a retelling of Emma by Jane Austen, but the main character has a sibling who is on the autism spectrum. I liked it. It was inoffensive. I don't have many things to complain about. It just wasn't a favorite or a standout for me. Next up, I have Does My Head Look Big in This by Randa Abdel Fattah. This is a book that was actually sent to me a couple of years ago by a subscriber, and I did read it. It was another kind of middle of the road book for me. I appreciated it because it was like one of the first books I ever read that had a Muslim hijabi main character, and so I learned a lot about that experience through it because it is an Own Voices novel. I think the book is just meant for like a younger audience than myself, and there were honestly some things in the book that had to do with like body positivity and slut shaming that I really did not agree with. I've been hanging on to it because I generally enjoyed the book, and I always like having the opportunity to promote stories like this to other people, but I definitely think it would be better in the hands of somebody who's actually going to read and benefit from the story instead of just collecting dust on my shelves. Next up is An Abundance of Catherines by John Green. Another one I read a million years ago and have just been hanging on to because I've read many John Green books and I have a good number of them. This was always my least favorite John Green book though, by far. I think I read it in 2014 and I gave it like 2 stars. And if I give a book like less than 3 stars in 2014, like, you know it was not good. I don't remember anything about this book other than the fact that I was severely uninterested while reading. So it's time to go. Next up is another pretty recent read, and that is Somewhere Only We Know by Maureen Gu. This is one that I feel like I probably enjoyed a little bit more than some of the books on this list. It's another one that I think I gave about 3 stars. I really liked this book from the start. I thought the concept of like a K-pop star trying to escape her fame and having like a secret romance with a paparazzi was so intriguing. Firstly, the writing was just like not up to par for what I prefer and tolerate in young adult contemporaries. Secondly, the book started to reach that point of ridiculousness with the plot, and something I really hate is having to just like accept things as they are in a story even if they don't make sense. I found myself doing that a lot while reading, and I just wasn't as fond of it by the end. It's not a book I hated or disliked by any means. It's still one that I'd recommend to people who are maybe interested in reading more Asian literature or things about K-pop. It just wasn't for me personally. Next up is Tyler Johnson Was Here by J. Coles. I gotta be honest, I read this book a couple years ago and have 100% been holding on to it because of this gorgeous cover. This book wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. One of those situations where I really wasn't all that engaged while reading, therefore I don't remember a ton of the story. I firmly believe we need more own voices stories from marginalized authors and about topics like police brutality and grief and gang violence and all of the things that are discussed in this book. But compared to the other books that I've read on similar topics, they are just way more sophisticated and impactful, and this one just didn't really stick with me. Last on the list of books that I have read and am getting rid of is actually The List by Patricia Ford. I was really excited for this book. I wanted to read it super badly because it sounded like this awesome middle grade that had some Giver vibes. It was like a dystopian with a corrupt government, but it had this climate change angle. I thought it was gonna be fucking fantastic. And I gave it 2 honest shots. I got like 80% of the way through the audiobook the first time around, and then maybe like a year later, I wanted to give it another try in the physical format, and I read it all the way through, start to finish, and I still did not like it. This is another one that just had so much potential, and I just wanted to love it so bad and recommend it to everyone, and I can't. All those awesome things that I just talked about were unfortunately really contrived in the story. They were not developed upon enough. Like, the climate change thing I thought was awesome, and it was more of like a backdrop for the story than an active part of the plot, which was disappointing for me. I loved the writing style in this book. I think Patricia Ford is an incredible writer, and I will totally read stuff from her in the future just because of the way that her prose connected with me. But also, like, the characters had no personality. They were super flat, and I like did not know anything about them other than what they were doing in the story. It could have been really good, and I wanted it to be good so badly. It just wasn't. Next up are all the duplicate books that I'm getting rid of. So for whatever reason, I have like a final copy, or I got a second arc of it, and so I'm getting rid of the extra copies that I don't personally need. Pride by Ibby Zaboy, The Liars of Mariposa Island by Jennifer Matu, The Bells by Danielle Clayton, Dear Martin by Nick Stone, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, which I think is in this pile because I definitely got 2 copies of them, but I did recently read this book and I did not like it as much, so I think I might run to my bookshelf and get the other arc and get rid of that one too. I feel like this is a good time to mention it, especially in this video. So as a booktuber, I work with a lot of publishers where they either will send me books for free or sometimes they will pay me to talk about books on my channel in the hopes that I either share it on my channel or I review it and like it and recommend people to read it. A big misconception on BookTube is that booktubers are just like requesting the hell out of all these popular books and then never reading them, and that is not the case. A lot of the books specifically in this pile of duplicates and also in the books that I haven't read, like I get a ton of books sent to me by publishers that I don't know about until they show up on my door. I don't request them. They just have me on their mailing list that they send them to me in the hopes that I will share them. And that's why I love donating to my community so much, because I get a ton of books that I either don't want or don't need, but other people are able to benefit from that. So Dig Me Bryson Keller is a book that I am luckily interested in and will be keeping a copy of, but for this additional one, I really hope it ends up in the hands of a queer teenager who could really benefit from it. Odd One Out by Nick Stone, Three Dark Crowns by Kendara Blake, Passenger and Wayfarer by Alexandra Bracken, Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin, Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert, and Love Boat Taipei by Abigail Hing Wan. Next up we have The Diviners by Libba Bray, which many of you know is like a favorite story of mine. I love the whole series. I'm listening to the 4th book now and I absolutely adore it, but I do already have all of the Diviners books in hardcover now, and I feel like I've kind of been hanging on to this one, number one, because like I love having multiple editions of my favorite books, and number two, it does technically match the cover to Lair of Dreams because we've had like a million cover changes in the Diviner series, but it's fine. I'm not bitter, but it's just taking up space. I don't need it, and I'd rather someone else get to encounter this incredible story. A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Again, have been hanging on to it because I love having multiple editions of books, and this is the movie tie-in, which I really like. But the other edition I have of A Monster Calls has all of the illustrations that actually inspired the novel and the story, which I prefer so much more, so I just don't think I need it. The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I randomly got a copy of The Hunger Games in the mail from the publisher recently, so I was like, all right, I'll take the new copy and I will sell my old one. Now Entering Adamsville by Francesca Zappia and Ghost of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare are examples of me pre-ordering these books because I'm excited for them, and then the publisher sending me a copy for free. And the last two in this group are ones that I'm kind of sad to be getting rid of because they're both signed and personalized. And the first is The Trials of Apollo by Rick Riordan. Aren't I so dumb for getting rid of a signed, personalized Rick Riordan book? Like, why do I exist? I met Rick Riordan at BookCon last year, and I got this book like as a part of the signing line, but this sounds so materialistic. I have the whole Trials of Apollo series in hardcover, and it's been annoying me to look at this one tiny paperback amongst the rest of them, and I've been holding on to it just because Rick Riordan signed it, but honestly, I haven't even read the Trials of Apollo yet, so I have no attachment to this story, and I specifically wanted to meet him because I love many of his other books. The point of me getting this book was just to meet Rick Riordan, which I did and I feel satisfied by, so I'd rather give this like brand new, really nice signed copy to someone who's going to enjoy it much more than myself. And the other is Heartless by Marissa Meyer, also signed and personalized, and Marissa Meyer is one of my favorite authors, so like, again, am I dumb? I've had 2 copies of Heartless for forever because I bought it when this one came out, and then I got the gorgeous white edition from Owl Crate at the time. And I've been holding on to both of them because this one is signed and I like the white cover better. I feel like it's just time for me to make a decision because I do not need both. And because I've met Marissa Meyer so many times and I have so many, like pretty much all of her other books signed, I just don't feel it's necessary for me to hang on to this one when I like the other one more. But the more I've been looking at this book, the more I'm like, wait, I love the black cover. Maybe I should just keep this one. This is hard. I did not expect to be this thrown. I thought I was confident about all these choices. One of these will probably end up on my Depop. Not sure which yet. And finally, we have made it to the books that I'm unhauling that I have not read yet. I'm just gonna quickly run through the few of these that I am just like not interested in for no particular reason. Like the synopsis doesn't interest me. It's not a genre I think I would like. And then there's a couple others where I'm like more deliberately getting rid of them. True to Yourself by Megan McCafferty, Influence by Sarah Shepard and Lilia Buckingham, Slay by Brittany Morris, Perfect Record by Mary H.K. Choi, We Are the Wildcats by Siobhan Vivian, Arusha and the Song of Death by Roshni Chasky, My So-Called Bollywood Life by Nisa Sharma, Willa of the Wood by Robert Beatty, Dread Nation by Justina Ireland, I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez, Just One Day by Gail Foreman, and We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Fazial. Next up, we have Imposters by Scott Westerfeld. Now, this is a book that I literally wanted to return before I had even left the place where I had bought it. Essentially, I had gone to a signing with Cassie Clare, Holly Black, and Scott Westerfeld. And I actually had already met Scott Westerfeld a couple of years ago, and all of the books that I had from him, I had already gotten signed. Unfortunately though, I still had not read any Scott Westerfeld books, and I, at the time, felt really awkward going to book signings where it would be like a table with multiple authors and I would only bring up books for certain authors, so I always felt compelled to buy the other authors' books just to support them and to like talk to them and have them sign their books, because like I want to make it a good experience for them as well as myself. But after I had purchased the book and like was waiting for the signing to start, I was just like, it was really dumb of me to buy this book that is a spin-off to a series I have not read yet, like just to make the author feel good about signing it. So at least the regret that I have felt in purchasing this book has made it so I don't think I will make that mistake again in the future. But it's just time for me to let you go because I don't think I will ever get around to reading you. Next up is Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. I have been hanging on to this one because I like a few John Green books and I know who David Levithan is. I haven't exactly liked the David Levithan books that I've given a chance thus far, and I just do not foresee myself picking up this book anytime in the future. Next up is Girl Out of Water by Laura Silverman. This is one I'm kind of sad to be getting rid of because I was very interested in it at a time, and also I want it in a giveaway and it's like signed and personalized by the author. I always feel a little guilty when I get rid of a signed book, especially if it's personalized, but at the end of the day, like, wouldn't the author rather it be in the hands of someone who's going to read it and enjoy it than just sitting on my bookshelves? But there's no real reason why I'm getting rid of it. I just lost interest and I definitely don't foresee myself reading it with the long list of YA contemporaries I have to get to. Next up is Rule by Ellen Goodlett. This one was really interesting to me because it sounded so much like Three Dark Crowns by Kendara Blake, and I had read it at the time that I got this book, so I was like super excited to read something similar. Now it's been years and I've gotten absolutely no closer to picking it up, and with high fantasy, it's a genre I do like, but it's strangely, like, it's very hard for me to pick up a high fantasy and get invested in a story that is not from like an author that I already love. So again, just don't see myself getting to it. My Plain Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This is one I've been hanging on to because I hear this series is like super funny and I love a hilarious book. Also, y'all know I'm a massive fan of The Afterlife of Holly Chase, which is also by Cynthia Hand, and I haven't read anything else from her. Again, just so many books to get to. It's like a historical fiction paranormal story, which is not what I gravitate towards. And it's also a retelling of Jane Eyre, maybe Jane Eyre, which I haven't read. So I feel like I just don't have anything pulling me towards reading it, and therefore I think I should just pass it off and make space for something that I will really be interested in. None of the Above by I.W. Gregorio. This is a book I am pretty sure I got in like a book shopping challenge with Michael some time ago. I was excited to pick it up because it's about an intersex main character, which is something I've never read a fiction novel about before. But in the time since I've purchased this book, I've heard some kind of negative reviews from trans reviewers saying that the book doesn't have great representation. And considering that was like the sole reason I was interested in this book, I feel like there are better books about the intersex or trans experience that I could read that are more positively viewed. And I'm just gonna knock out the last 4 books on my Unhaul in one go. It is Armada by Ernest Cline. Oh, there's 2 Ernest Cline books in here too. Interesting. On the Edge of Gone by Corinne DeVis, Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and More Than This by Patrick Ness. I feel like all of these books have some sort of science fiction influence if they aren't considered to be a part of like the overall sci-fi genre, and it's just not something that I typically reach for, so I don't really see myself picking up any of these books anytime soon, especially because I've had all of these for multiple years, and I don't think there has been any point where I have looked at any of these and been like, I might want to read you soon. Alrighty, well, that concludes this unhaul. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I feel so good about finally getting so many of these books off of my shelves and especially into the hands of people that are hopefully going to enjoy them. In the comments below, be sure to let me know if there are any books that you also didn't like and would unhaul, if some of these are like your favorite and you are heartbroken and torn that I'm getting rid of them. If you're interested in maybe purchasing some of these books or other ones that I did not show in this video, check out my Depop link in the description down below. And also don't forget to check out Skillshare in the description of this video because doing so really helps support my channel. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye!